Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us every Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern, for the Skills Summer Seminars. I'm especially excited about today because I think we're going a level down. We talked about strategy and about all those other things you need to do. And one of the complaints about AI in legal is it didn't get to do the magic, right? There is no pressing a button, getting a document. So today's session is actually much closer to that, right? It's how do you generate documents, how do you work with the documents, and other things that both Ozan and Emily are going to share with us. I want to remind everyone, this is a seminar, it's not a webinar. We encourage you to get off mute, turn on the camera, ask any question you want. If you are an introvert, write in the chat, just put the word questions in all caps. And then we could take it from there. But if you want to ask question, and you'll see there are some areas that are audience participation, and for us to learn and engage, would love to take advantage of that. So with that, Ozan and Emily, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Oz. Hi, everybody. Great to be here with you. So we are very excited to be here and to talk about using AI in contract drafting and review. So from the DraftWise side, we have two speakers. I am Ozan, one of the co-founders of DraftWise and Chief Strategy Officer. Prior to co-founding DraftWise, I was a lawyer for about 10 years, and for the most part, I practiced law at Clifford Chance in their banking and finance team. And Emily?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Emily Lew. I have joined DraftWise recently, 3 months ago, from my prior role at Slaughter & May, where I was heading up the innovation and tech team. In my former life, I was a litigator. I also started out at Clifford Chance, just like Ozan. I was a litigator, and I ended up moving from litigation into a knowledge role. So I had a stint as a professional support lawyer, and then I worked in the central knowledge team. And that kind of, I guess, evolved into an innovation role and then an innovation and tech role. And now I have made a career pivot and have moved from being a buyer of legal tech and owning Slaughter & May's legal tech portfolio to the other side. So I'm calling it the bright side, not the dark side. But yeah, I've moved to the other side. So that's a little bit about me. And I should also say that I am coming to you live today from the press room at the Legal Tech Talk conference. So if there's any background noise, I apologize.
So as you probably all know, drafting, reviewing, and negotiating contracts has a lot of pain points, has a lot of room for making more effective and efficient. And I have personally felt those pain points numerous times as I was practicing law at Clifford Chance. So I used to be negotiating or drafting complex credit agreements, and the questions will pop up to my mind: oh, has the counterparty accepted this provision before? What were the client preferences of my clients, and what are the market trends? Or I would ask myself and wish I had something that will surface the revisions that we incorporated before in a more effective way, so I could finish marking up the document or drafting the document. So with that, we co-founded DraftWise 5 years ago, and I guess being relatively old as a company, assuming that generative AI happened 2 years ago, we had the ability to see both pre-generative AI and post-generative AI. And you all have witnessed how widely legal tech is being adopted at this time. Today, we will be talking and focusing on the latest and I would say greatest advancements in AI. So we will be talking about AI and AI agents. So what's agentic AI? Why does it matter? You probably heard a lot about agents. How will agents change contract drafting and review? What can you do to prepare? And in the last 15 minutes or so, we want to leave it for a discussion and questions. And at any time, please ask questions that you might have in your mind. So it's a more of a dialogue rather than us just presenting.
So I think the next step is for the poll. So we're going to kick off with the poll. So be really grateful if you guys would fill this in. There's a couple of multiple choice questions, bit binary, yes or no, and then some free text questions as well. This is really just to gauge people's, I guess, levels of experience with agents and non-agentic AI as well, their use of AI in contract review and drafting, and to gauge people's views on it, views on readiness of lawyers. So it would just be interesting to see your views.
While we're waiting, I am a big proponent of agents. That's why we have chosen this subject today. I am super excited. It took me a while actually to really understand what that means. We had lengthy discussions with the engineering team. Hopefully today, after our discussion, you will be excited about it too.
Okay, so it looks like the majority of respondents are not using agents. That's not really surprising. I think they're really brand new. But nearly everybody is using AI. So I think there's a good distinction there between agents and AI. Does it have a place? Everybody says yes, nearly. Are lawyers ready? Most people are saying yes. So that's a good sign. How can AI help in drafting and review of contracts? We've got clauses, precedent coming up there in the word cloud, and lots of people's views, extracting from knowledge bank, expedited precedent review, comparing terms in a way that still maintains standards and consistency. And then what can it not do? Drafting from scratch, nuance, complexity, judgment calls. That all seems pretty understandable. And I think there are definitely some limitations there for sure.
Yeah, and we will be covering some of the limitations that we have discovered ourselves and how we are trying to overcome. So hopefully it will shed some light onto your initiatives too. So briefly, I want to take us about 5 years ago when I first heard in 2022, we were at Y Combinator. I heard the word GPT-2 or GPT. But to be honest, I don't know whether GPT existed before, but that was the first time, me being a very new lawyer in the tech world, I heard the word GPT from my co-founder, James, my CEO. But at that time, we will look at some of the examples of how GPT-2 could have been used. It would not have been useful at all in drafting and reviewing contracts. Then at the end of 2022, we had the ChatGPT come about, and I think all of us have probably experienced what that meant for us. And then we have law firms and solutions using RAG, and I will explain what that means in a bit. And then eventually we are at the era of agents, which I am really excited about. So let's delve into briefly what it meant. So 5 years ago, and you will also realize how AI improved so much in the last 5 years. If you were to go to GPT-2 and say, as the user, find me a definition of confidential information from my recent SPAs and tell me which revisions I should include in my recent draft, it would have told you something along the lines of confidential information is the information that is private and not sharing for others. The definition of confidential information should be in the contract. So it would not have been useful at all. There wouldn't basically it's not in legal contract drafting way at all. Not useful for legal drafting. There is no synthesis. The definition is circular and definitely ignores the context of the recent SPA. So at that time, if you were to introduce GPT-2 to your lawyers, they would have been like, thank you, we were not going to use that. But then came ChatGPT at the end of 2022. And that was the first time actually when you tried it, or if you tried it at that time, you will be like, oh, this is really interesting. AI can give us actually, meaningful clauses. It could have given us a good definition of confidential information. But the context and the limitation at that time was it couldn't tap into our past work. So it was giving us this information from this black box of knowledge it learned pre-trained by large language models being exposed to all the information in the internet, right? So it had better structure, context, understood the idea of carve-outs, but it was mostly general practice. It couldn't tap into your past work. But once that potential was there, solutions like ours started tapping into the technology of RAG, and RAG is retrieval augmented generation. It sounds very fancy, but what that means is basically, Gen AI generates words, and it does so by also relying on the documents that you introduce. And actually, many of you, you have indicated you're using AI solutions. These leverage RAG technologies. You might have built it internally, you might have purchased a solution, and what that means is that all those actions that you can take. You can upload documents to it, ask to summarize questions that you might have. You can ask, hey, what are the confidential information definitions we used in these SPAs that I uploaded? It will give you that information, right? Or it might even tell you, hey, this is missing. Maybe you want to do this revision and such. But for the most part, with Bragg still, even though it retrieves the information very well, it falls short in giving good suggestions and revisions. So this is one thing that we have also observed. And I think some of the results that we have seen in the poll was indicating that revisions are actually not good enough by Gen AI or in drafting. And I totally agree. This is one of the limitations that if you are just using RAG, basically the many of the solutions at the moment, you might have some limitations. Lawyers will still enjoy it, but they might think, oh, this is getting there, but we need a little bit more, and they will revise it themselves. It's definitely very useful. So definitely worth adopting these kind of technologies, but also worth knowing the limitations they have. Then we are at the age of agents. So while you were doing the polls, I explained I'm really excited about agents and what that means. So I had very elaborate discussions with my team. I am very excited about agents because I think it can definitely help us overcome the adoption challenge that we have with lawyers. And I'm going to give you how it can do that and give an explanation. In DraftWise, right, we have different pillars. We have the search pillar. In the search, you can go back to your documents and say, hey, DraftWise, give me indemnification language from my past SPAs or confidential information. You can search. That's one ability. Then another ability is expediting the spotting issues, right? You can upload, let's say you're reviewing credits agreement, you can upload a past agreement and ask DraftWise to spot issues and give revisions. So these are two distinct pillars of DraftWise and features, right? But as a user, I need to know them individually. If I'm searching, I need to go and search. I need to know how search works in DraftWise. If I am, expediting the review of contracts, I need to know how this comparison feature works, and I need to be a savvy user. Agents changes that totally, and that is really important. Now, in DraftWise, you can come to a chatbot and say, hey, DraftWise, tell me how I can make revisions to this reps and covenant package that I'm seeing in my credit agreement based on my past credit agreements, and give me suggestions. When the agent receives that comment from you, basically it has a couple components, right? It has the search component because it needs to tap into your past work, find reps and warranties from your credit agreements. Then it needs to understand the differences and suggest revisions. So at that moment, you gave one prompt. The agent knows the tools and capabilities of DraftWise. So then it goes, okay, I'm an agent. I can use many different parts of DraftWise. I'm going to go to the search space, use the search function, and then I'm going to feed what I found to the other ability of DraftWise, which is the comparison function, and give you suggestions. So this is obviously, this agent technology is not just, something specific to DraftWise. Many solutions will come with it. But imagine how effective it is. Instead of lawyers knowing different parts of the platform, can give that command to the agent. An agent knowing the abilities of the platform can accomplish these very, very elaborate and complex actions on behalf of the lawyer. We always talk how it's difficult for lawyers to adopt technology, how easy it should be to walk up usably of the product. And this is very key for making the products walk up usable. So what if this actually works? So my dream as a past transactional lawyer is to be like, hey, here's the term sheet, generate the first draft using the language we typically use for this client. And then in the negotiation setting, the AI to tell me, hey, you should incorporate these revisions, and you should push back on these revisions you received from the other side. That's my dream. I think that's where we're going to get to. Yeah.
I think that's totally the holy grail, right? I mean, that would be mission accomplished. We've done it. AI actually works in legal.
Yeah, so it's super exciting. I think it's going to come. Hopefully, we will have our hat as Draftwise in that journey. But as a lawyer, regardless of kind of a legal tech person, I will be exhilarated to see this because we will always have the lawyer in the loop. But that's like true use of AI in the tech. And let's have this mind kind of imagination, which we have already imagined and sort of like set out the steps because we are working on this now. If you were to, let's say you can create an agent, right? And you want the agent to have the term sheet and generate the first draft. What would you want the agent to do? First, many lawyers start from an old precedent, right? We have something that we have used. You will want this agent to redact the old, like the sensitive deal information, party names, strip out the details from prior transaction. Then each term sheet have basic elements like the party names, loan amount, interest rate, repayment schedule. These are not really negotiated. They are very straightforward. You'll want AI to apply those. Then you have the substantive subjective terms that are heavily negotiated, like reps and covenants, prepayment events. Then you will want your AI to go back to your credit agreements, find examples, know client preferences, understand the risk profile, counterparty dynamics, and draft that on your behalf. So as Draftwise indicated, we are working on different parts of these. So I'm going to show you what we have done for number 3. Just so that you can imagine in concrete terms what can be achieved. Let me share my screen and then we can go from there.
And if anyone have any question anytime, just turn on your camera and unmute yourself. Ozan is used being interrupted by customers.
True. Right. Distribute. Okay, this is exciting. I mean, for me, it's very exciting. Hopefully, it is exciting for you too. So I have this SPA here. I have Draftwise. Again, this could have been any solution that has the capabilities or leverages AI well or agents well. And I am reviewing here the definition of losses. My instruction to the agent is make my definition of losses more seller friendly, right? Based on my recent SPAs. Why is this important? It leverages AI, but it understands your past work, right? That is actually the holy grail. It should understand your preferences. It should go back and tap into your past work. So now you're seeing the actions that the AI is taking. It's exerting the relevant parts from the open document. It creates a search plan where it's going to search for definition of losses from your past transaction. And it's going to search for definitions that might exclude important points like indirect or consequential or special losses that are seller friendly. So at this stage, imagine if I were to take this myself, I would have to know how to run a search. I will have to download those, run a comparison and all. But instead, it understood what I'm looking at. It understood my past provisions. And it said you can continue to exclude punitive damages or consequential damages. So it ran this analysis yourself. And then when I say incorporate the specific red line into my SPA, it's going to do that. So this agent that you're witnessing at this moment is leveraging the searchability of Draftwise and what we call the comparability, then the revision ability that we have built in other parts of the platform. And you can accept the suggestion and move on. Maybe we can talk about one more example that will give an idea. And that will relate to, we're going to talk about like another point about indemnification amounts, right? I will be able to ask the indemnification about
I mean,
how it compares.
Ozan, why did they have to ask it? Why doesn't it offer me to revise my language based on that? It shouldn't be anticipate that's the next thing I would like to do.
Actually, you're absolutely right. It should, and this is something that we are working on at the moment. At times, one of the things that you realize is that actually maybe no need to show another example. One of the things that you will realize as a shortcoming as you're reviewing agents, you will have to train them a little bit for the non-deterministic actions it takes, because sometimes it will suggest that it will say, "Hey, I have done it and revised it for you." Sometimes it will stop and say, "Hey, do you want me to revise it?" So you have to kind of work through those use cases. Not you, but like the solution providers need to work through those use cases. But I want to kind of pause here and see if you have any questions, whether what you have seen was exciting in the sense of like what agents can achieve.
I think it's exciting. It's definitely.
Have agents solved the hallucinations then?
Yes,
It
pretty
still
much.
hallucinates? Right.
Yeah. So what's very good with agents is that it prevents hallucination because you can instruct the agents to tie any revision it provides to your past work. So once you do that, it overcomes the issue of hallucinations. I wouldn't be in a position to say it solves it 100%, but it solves in majority 90% plus. It's that citation part is really important because as a lawyer, you can directly see the relevant parts of your past agreements, why it made that judgment call, and you can move on.
And so does it repeat as well? So if you ask the same question over and over again, does it come, is it coming back with very similar language, or
Yes,
is it still quite okay?
It does, and that's very important because so that there, I think what's really important to realize is agents, again, is a tool that can leverage different abilities of a solution, right? For us, why it can repeat the same ability is that in the initial stage, we are using our search ability, and our search ability doesn't leverage generative AI at all. It's by natural language processing. So it's very deterministic in a sense. Then we feed that outcome to generative AI for analysis. So I don't know how it would function if the whole tool is generative AI. That I don't have an exposure to. Maybe it will work well, but I don't have exposure to it. One aspect I can say is that if you're evaluating, and generally this will be true for search solutions, it's very difficult for generative AI to run a search over a tremendous set of documents that you have in your law firms. The reason is that it will be doing that through vector database. Some part of it is doable, but it can be very costly and it can be very slow if you're asking really complicated questions. It doesn't need to be, but it's a very hard and difficult technology to crack.
I heard that LLMs are just not good search engines.
It's true, they are not. I mean, I have not this in my personal testing of LLMs for search. I never received a very robust, I would say, output. The reason why I'm answering with a little bit hesitation is that we never had to do it at DraftWise, because maybe one thing that we had to build search before generative AI. So we tried generative AI a couple of times in search and it was like really subpar. So I'm talking with a little hesitation. Maybe there are other solutions that I'm not aware of that is good, but to be honest, it's really hard to feed millions of documents that you have into a vector database. It's extremely costly. And then each time, if you were to run a search, it will rack up the charges and it will take a very long time. So it's important to know that it's a solution that you're evaluating. If they're saying we can revise, let's say, your provisions based on your past work, and search is going to be a very integral part of that, please look into the technology they have adopted and how they built their search ability, how they built their revisions ability. It's an important one for you to evaluate. But with that, I want to yield the floor. Sorry, somebody else you had.
Yeah, I mean, when you design the search, can you influence the agent to give higher ranks to documents that are in the knowledge bank? Let's say we have a form for the document you're just doing. You ask it to look at your prior work, but we have a form firm-wide that we drafted, which is a gold standard. Can you influence the request that despite the user saying just go after my work, to also augment it or to prioritize the firm's preferred form?
Yes, you can do that. Because like when I say you can do that, I said we can do that because I know how our search works, for example. But let's say independent of DraftWise, a company can do that if their search has that ability. For example, in our search, we don't need to search the entire DMS. We can search knowledge materials only, or knowledge materials plus a certain practice group's documents. Let's say the corporate teams documents last 2 years and knowledge materials. So in that case, we can do that because, again, initial stage of everything analysis that we do in running those analyses, suggesting revisions, running comparisons, leveraging our search ability. Yeah. And I think that's, yeah.
Two questions on that front, Ozan. First, this is super exciting. I'm Emily Colantino. I'm the Director of Operations at Manat. So how does DraftWise hook into our systems? Do we have to connect it with those gold standard precedents we want to search? That's my first question. The second question is around agents. Is DraftWise building that? We already have lawyers building some of their own agents at Manat. Is it something that DraftWise would work with us to build, or are you expecting the buyer to build it to hook into your system?
Great question. So for us, the search, we integrate with your databases automatically. Let's say I manage net documents at SharePoint, and we start processing the documents that you have through using, again, not generative AI, but natural language processing and machine learning methods that we have built internally. And then we will leverage Elasticsearch and such. So for us, it will be just integrating with your document management system, and then you can automatically run those searches. When it comes to the agents, we are building our own agents at this moment that serves to the use cases that I have mentioned. So we want to do the kind of weight and carry that burden ourselves, because we have found that there are these actions that, regardless of which law firm you're in, depending on your practice group, you tend to undertake frequently. For example, as a credit lawyer, if I worked at Slaughter May, Kirkland Ellis, or Clifford Chance, I would have taken similar actions where I would have looked at reps and covenant packages, analyzed it against my past documents, or it would have been important for me to negotiate prepayment events and such. So we are building those agent use cases as collaboration. At the same time, as we are exploring new use cases with law firms, they come up with ideas, and then we again build the agents for them, because we know the capabilities and I want to say the limitations of our platform, as well as its kind of abilities and its powers.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome. Awesome. With that, I want to yield the floor to Emily. I've talked quite a bit, but it's the central point that's really important, as Oz mentioned. It's really important to leverage your past work, your knowledge materials, as you are using AI. Because without quality documents, AI is going to generate, if not your past documents, it can be quality knowledge materials is really important. So AI needs to leverage your precedents, and Emily is going to talk about that.
Ozan's told us a lot about the product and the technicalities around it. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the difficulties maybe of operating in a law firm environment, which is not always the easiest place to make change and innovation happen. These things on the slide here are all the things that a firm needs to do when it's preparing for using AI in contract drafting and review, or in fact, preparing to introduce any legal tech. And it's a pretty enormous list, and it's not an easy task. All of that fell within my remit at my previous role at Slaughter and May. So if any of you are sitting there in like heads of innovation type roles, I totally sympathize, because I was dealing with exactly what you're dealing with right now. So I wanted to talk to each of these really briefly, but I'm going to zero in on the following slides on items 4 and 5, which I think are the most relevant. So really briefly, I'll go through each one. Let's talk about the first step. What is the firm's overall AI strategy? I guess the firm needs to decide where it sits on the spectrum of, enthusiastic early adopter and innovator, right through to, sitting back and letting other firms be the guinea pigs. Are you going to go for full generative AI, or are you going to stay in the realms of ordinary AI, machine learning? Are you going to use AI on your complex legal client work, or are you going to stick with the safer general productivity use cases to start with? So there's a real spectrum there. And I think the very first thing that you need to do is figure out where is the firm going to position itself and act in accordance with the strategy. Secondly, getting your governance ducks in a row. So we are regulated environments. We need to make sure that the firm itself and the firm's clients are comfortable with using AI for legal use cases on client matters. So what can you do to get yourself comfortable? Reviewing the client terms and conditions to check that you've got wording in there that covers the use of AI, considering the firm's insurance position. Actually having robust governance in place around AI can really improve that insurance position and reduce the premiums, as it evidences that careful and robust approach. Speaking to any clients who are naysayers, we all know there's a few of them out there who say, don't use AI on any of my matters. That, I think, is a dwindling number. And I think we are already seeing reduction in that number year on year. So I think everybody's mindset is going in one direction. It's just that some are slower than others. So I think that's something that can be overcome by talking individually to those clients, similar to an exercise that many law firms went through a few years ago with the advent of cloud. Potentially reviewing data and the need for data cleanup exercise, the ability maybe to ring fence any data of those naysayer clients, and also starting to think about acceptable use policies for users. These are all things that the compliance team in the law firm needs to get to grips with. What about procurement? So you've overcome those things, and now you want to actually buy some legal tech or some AI tools. What you want is a really robust process for procuring them. You want to make sure that your vendors have got the right security certifications. You need to understand the data flows. You need to consider whether maybe you get more comfort from using private cloud. Ensure that all the internal stakeholders are on board, and that includes your IT team, your information security team, your compliance team. Selecting vendors who are credible, who are experienced, and who are responsive and give you good customer service and are going to partner with you in terms of not only onboarding, but also ongoing adoption and helping you to demonstrate return on investment. Number 4 is use cases. So this is really central. There's so much hype out there, and it's so easy to be overwhelmed by the growing nature of the legal tech market. But a really good place to start, if you do feel that overwhelm, is to just say, right, let's keep it simple. What use cases do I need to solve? What problems do I need to solve here? And if there are millions, you want to essentially try to narrow them down and just choose one to focus on. Choosing just one and starting somewhere, even if it's small, is much better than not starting at all. So we'll talk about that a bit more on the next slide. And we'll also talk a bit more about data readiness. So preparing your data for AI and agents. I'll come on to that shortly. What about number 6, defining objectives? What is it that you want to achieve by using AI? So many firms are just like, oh, AI's out there, I better quickly jump on the bandwagon because all my other rival law firms are doing it. But actually taking that step back and clarifying your objectives is going to set you up for success. What is it that you're aiming to do? Is it improving speed, reducing errors? Is it ensuring compliance? Is it automating low-value tasks? If you fail to define it up front, you're going to find it very difficult to persuade the budget holders in the organization to make the investment. Number 7, preparing mindsets. This is the people part. So where do your lawyers sit on the spectrum of Luddite at one end to enthusiastic adopter? It's likely there's going to be a range within the law firm. In my experience, you often get really junior lawyers who are super comfortable with tech. They actually expect to use it. And also, they're in a good position to cross-pollinate it in terms of adoption around the firm. I'm specifically thinking of trainees in UK law firms who do 4 6-month seats. So as they move around the firm, they're really good at spreading the word amongst those different practice groups. A good thing to do in the beginning is to maybe run some training sessions and education program to get people comfortable with the idea of using AI. They need to understand the capabilities, but also the limitations. They need to think about the ethical considerations and when is it best practice to use it. These things might seem obvious and natural to the kind of community of people that we are, but there are very many people out there who haven't really thought these things through and maybe don't feel comfortable and maybe are nervous to ask. Also, another angle is having maybe specific education for senior leadership who might be more uncomfortable with the concept and the disruption that it likely presents maybe to the business model of the law firm. And another way is getting people familiar with tools by way of pilots. A good starting point would be general productivity, just to get people used to dealing with AI agents, LLMs, and interacting with them and prompting. So the final one, number 8, is around piloting, tracking, adopting, measuring, and managing change. So that really ties into what I've said at the bottom. Who is going to do all this stuff? This is a very enormous list of things. And particularly that number 8 is pretty much a full-time job. Running pilots, tracking people's usage, getting feedback, pushing adoption, measuring the ROI, and managing change is really a full-time job. There are many different structures in law firms of people who might do this. Is there a dedicated innovation and legal tech team? Will it be owned by the knowledge lawyers or senior management or even the IT team? If you leave this to individual lawyers, they are going to struggle to prioritize it over their workload. Reviewing the market, arranging the pilots, implementing change takes so much time. Much of what I've covered on this slide doesn't necessarily sit within traditional KM activity, but actually I think that KM activity is really central, particularly to the use cases that we're talking about today, to contract drafting tools that sit at that intersection of AI and KM. And also the KM role, as we know and have seen over the past years, is really flexible and is continually evolving. I think there's a massive opportunity for dynamic KM lawyers to own this, particularly points 4 and 5, which is what I'd like to turn to next. Let's look at the next slide, and that will talk about identifying use cases. So, how do we do this? This should be the first step, identifying pain points in the current drafting and negotiation processes. So let's evaluate those current workflows to identify inefficiencies, bottlenecks, high-risk areas. What are some of the key pain points? The ones that I have seen are reinvention of the wheel, people starting with blank paper instead of going to the precedent, people ignoring and not complying with endorsed knowledge processes. Another common pain point is taking too long to get to the first draft or taking too long to get to the final negotiated contract. Another one is we know we have institutional knowledge in the law firm, but it's not accessible, it's not known about, and it's not being incorporated in work product. That's a very common one. Another one, insights are not readily surfaceable from precedents and knowledge banks. We know the insights are in there, but we cannot get them out meaningfully. Are there playbooks? Has that kind of knowledge about positions that counterparts have taken, that clients have taken? Are they actually captured, written down anywhere? Are they easy to access? Can you use them? Another pain point, there's no easy way to get an overview of a very long and complex document. There's no way to easily get a handle or a view on compliance with preferred positions. A very common one, redlining is clunky and difficult and takes too long. All of these are common pain points, but by identifying those pain points, what you're doing is starting to articulate what the likely use cases are for the AI. So in practice, how do you do it? I'm going to share with you what we did at Slaughter and May. We had a legal process design program where we identified 6 practice areas, or 6 work types rather. So to take an example, a standard M&A transaction. a private acquisition of a company, we identified 6 of these, which are very common work types in the law firm. And we ran deep dive workshops over lunchtime, a couple of hours. We threw the partner out the room, but we had everyone else there, ranging from the PAs, the paralegals, and the trainees, through to the junior and senior associates. And prior to the workshops, we had used the knowledge lawyers and the professional support lawyers to produce process maps, so like a 1-page flowchart essentially, showing the key steps and tasks and phases that were taken in each of these matters. And we put those in front of the people at the workshop so that first of all, they could validate that it actually is the workflow that they're following. And you would be surprised how almost none of them had ever seen it written down anywhere or captured on a piece of paper before. And secondly, to identify where are the bottlenecks, where are the inefficiencies, and then to ideate how can we address those problems and how can we address the pain points. Surprisingly, or not surprisingly, not all of the ideas were technology related. There are lots of other ways to address pain points. Innovation is not only focused on tech, but of course, we are in the world that we're in. Tech is becoming more and more of a prominent part in legal process. So breaking work down in this way into these small steps actually has lots of benefits. First of all, it enables the lawyers to kind of capture and share the knowledge of what they're doing without thinking. But secondly, it's going to help you when you're interacting with an agent or an AI, because if you're thinking about your work in terms of small, manageable steps, that is the best way of prompting and interacting with these tools. If you split work and tasks into short, simple sequential steps, you're going to get the best outputs. So actually that exercise is doubly effective. And what we did after the workshops is we took away the outputs and we went to the senior stakeholders in each practice group and we prioritized the outputs and the ideas. So we very much took a dual track approach when choosing which one, because sometimes we had 50 plus ideas. We either went for the low-hanging fruit, or we went for something that was going to give us the most return on investment, i.e. it was going to have the most impact. Depending on the practice group, they chose it and prioritized it in that way. So once you've identified your use cases, what I would recommend doing is just choose one. Just focus on one and keep that in your mind when you're piloting, trialing, and procuring tech. There will be lots of distractions and lots of opportunities to kind of go off track, and that's fine. But I would say sometimes it can lead to confusion and overwhelm because there are just so many products and so many use cases out there. So it seems good advice to kind of focus in there on one. The obvious ones to focus on are knowledge management, drafting and reviewing contracts, legal research, general productivity. 2 particular ones that I see coming up time and time again under that hat of drafting and reviewing contracts are where you have a gold standard document or a template, but the incoming third-party paper differs from it massively in terms of format or wording. So the concepts might be relatively similar, but lawyers are spending a lot of time fixing up the document to align the format or make the gold standard document talk to the incoming third-party paper. And another use case that I see coming up frequently is where comments from the other side are going back and forth in an email chain rather than markups. And the lawyers have to translate those email comments into contractual language. Those are 2 use cases I see a lot, which people say are creating a lot of inefficiency. And that's where tools like DraftWise can really address those kinds of use cases. So my final slide, the next one, is about data readiness. This is a separate topic to use cases, but I wanted to zero in on this one because I hear a lot of law firms saying, well, we really want to buy some AI, but our data is in such a mess. We have to do an enormous 3-year data cleanup exercise before we can even contemplate it. I wanted to kind of dispel that myth. Yes, you do need to do something to get your data ready for AI. That's definitely true. But the good news is, much of what you need to do to get your data ready falls within the umbrella of traditional knowledge management activity. So if you have the luxury in your firm of people who have got those dedicated knowledge roles, they should be considering how to organize the data in the way that will make the AI output better. And how can they do that? They need to centralize contracts or clauses in a structured, ideally a structured format and definitely a machine readable format. This is just like curating, which is a standard traditional knowledge management activity, but I guess you're curating here for the AI tool rather than for the human lawyer. Think about the curating things that KM lawyers do: selecting taxonomy, applying metadata, maybe sanitizing documents, maybe organizing data in some way. The KM lawyers are already doing that. So tagging, adding metadata, creating collections. Can you think of a way to indicate, for example, whether precedents are more buyer or seller friendly? Can you identify gold standard precedents? Do you have any playbooks? Even if you have playbooks in people's heads and they're not captured on paper, is there a way it can be captured even in some kind of rough and ready way? But what I would say is, don't overthink this and overstructure. The tech now, especially the agents, are really, really good at understanding legal concepts. Even when there's no metadata, it can really approximate metadata. So you can ask it to tell you what a specific counterparty has agreed in the past, and it can do that even without your having previously tagged it with that counterparty's name. With prompting, we find that simple directive prompting is better than giving it tons and tons of context and preferred language. When you give it loads of preferred language, you're probably going to get back an over marked up, over lawyered document, even when it's not necessary. So over lawyering can lead to poor outputs and too much rigidity, I would say. Another bit of good news here is that you can really expect and lean on your vendor to help you with this. They should be partnering with you to help you understand what you need to do to get your data ready to get the tool to work the best way. They should help you to understand your own data infrastructure. So for example, when I piloted DraftWise when I was still at Slaughter and May, we did have the luxury of having that heavily curated knowledge collection, as like what you were saying before. And we wanted DraftWise to surface to our lawyers that endorsed content first. We wanted that to come up first. And what DraftWise did was they partnered with us and built us a special green tick, like, you know, the Twitter blue tick, to indicate to users that certain content came from that endorsed knowledge collection and was distinct from ordinary precedent. So finally, the very final bit of good news is that the vendors know that your DMS is probably likely to be a bit messy, and they've built the tools to work with that mess without the major data cleanup exercise having been undertaken. The tools can understand the legal concepts, and they understand what the user's seeking, and they can sift through the mass of data to find the gems. If we're going to get really meta here for a moment, there are even agents who are being built to do the data structuring exercise for you. So DraftWise's agent, for example, can build you playbooks without you ever having captured them on paper. If you've just got a gold standard document, it can build a playbook based off that, and no knowledge work or structuring has been done to make that happen. So that was all I was going to say. I'd love to open the floor to any thoughts, questions on that, or on anything that we've covered, or anything else at all. That last one is my favorite. Does anyone actually know what's market? That's the holy grail, if the tool can tell you, right? What's market?
A lot of thinking about what's market and how it helps. But yes.
One thing that I kind of want to mention, that this is important, that Emily also mentioned, this new technologies being able to cope with a mess, or not having to tag or have a metadata on everything. I think that's also important. At least in our experimentations, if you are doing basically, if you're structuring the agent in the right way with a good search foundation, it can approximate, let's say, if your search were to be like, give me the prepayment clauses where JP Morgan was the lender and Apple was the borrower, and you never tagged JP Morgan as the lender or Apple as the borrower. Good search engines at this moment can actually find those answers by leveraging agents. So there is that, because one of the existential things that we kept on hitting, to be honest, before the agents, we wanted to build a semantic search ability. We built it, and then we gave it to users. So imagine this Google type search. People are coming to it running semantic search, but the minds of the lawyers have changed so much after ChatGPT that they were asking these really elaborate questions, right? They were asking questions like, recently we saw one, what were the price adjustments relating to the tax tariffs that are in like power purchase agreements, and how did this law firm deal with it? Like, there is no way a semantic search, like a search, can answer that.
Mhm.
But if you are leveraging agent in the right way, think about this almost like chat DMS. It's like good search foundation and
Mhm.
overcomes the metadata tagging. Obviously, if you have tags, it makes the results even better. So please continue that initiative.
And Ozan, can your agent work with other search engine? Let's say we already invested in an enterprise search for the firm. We like our search engine. Can your agents interact with that and get results through that? Or are we not there yet?
We haven't tested it. Maybe technically it's possible, but since I have not seen in action, I cannot say yes or no. I haven't seen it. I mean, but
Some
technically,
part of the promise of the agentic architecture is you could intermingle the best
sure,
of what you have and have system talk to each other and have
sure.
different products.
I totally agree. I mean, that's like really, really exciting from a law firm's perspective, and it should be able to do it. I just don't know what sort of tech investments we will need to do. Like, I don't know, like, do we need to talk to the API of that database? Does the agent need, like, what are the restrictions, limitations? That's something for us to explore.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to remind everyone, really great presentation, Ozan and Emily. Fantastic, really to the point. I want to remind everyone with the few minutes that we have left, a couple of things. One, this seminar happens every Friday until ILTA. Two, at ILTA, we have the party for everyone who works in a law firm. And second, and the third, we have the workflow competition that the Skills and Deep Judge did. If you have any idea, first prize is $5,000. Other five, there are 4 or 5 more, $500. So, and if you click on there, if you go to skills.law, you could put your ideas there and participate. So submit, and I think that's it. Thank you so much. Oh, last thing, in the chat, you have link to the feedback. Please send us your feedback. We'd love to know what you like, what you don't like, so we could share with the people who put the time here. But really fantastic presentation. Thank you. It was really great.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks.